When you start out and build your first business, you're sold for the freedom, the flexibility, the upside. And after years of running my own business while raising a young family, I want to share with you the part that nobody actually warns you about. These are the 5 honest truths that I wish someone had told me years ago. And I want to give you a simple framework that helps to turn the chaos of business into your biggest advantage to create the work and life that you love. Let's get into it. And the first lesson is that you will work harder, not less. And I don't just mean more hours. Although, yes, there will be more hours. I mean a different kind of hard because when you work for someone else, you can clock out and the problems stay at the office, right? But when you run your own thing, that problem, it comes home with you. They sit with you at dinner. They wake you up at 3 a.m. You're thinking about cash flow while you're giving your kid a bath. You're mentally drafting emails while you're supposed to be relaxing the weekend. And I remember the early days of my business so clearly. I had just left a very comfortable corporate career. I was very excited. I was motivated. I was ready to build something of my own. But then it really hit me. I was doing the marketing, the sales calls, the client delivery, the invoicing, finance, the admin. I was working longer hours than I ever did in corporate. And I was making a fraction of what I used to earn. So here's the thing. That first win, that first client, that first bit of traction, it feels really incredible. It's like this rush that makes you think, yes, I made the right choice. But what happens after that rush is the part nobody talks about. You have to keep showing up day after day without a team cheering you on, without a manager giving you a performance review, without this clear ladder to climb in your career. It's just you. And research has found that 72% of entrepreneurs, they report significant mental health challenges, including anxiety, burnout, and chronic stress. It's because nobody prepared them for what building a business actually feels like on the inside. So here's the first part of the clear framework. C is for clarity. Get clear on what you're actually signing up for. It's not this Instagram version of entrepreneurship, that real one. Because when you expect the hard part, it stops feeling like something is wrong with you. It just becomes part of the process. And that shift in perspective, that's really your unfair advantage. You know what you are really in for and whether you actually love the game of business. And lesson 2, I want to tell you this honestly upfront, is that nobody has it figured out. Now, this next part is something I wish someone had told me when I was just starting out because I spent years looking at the other successful entrepreneurs and thinking they had some master plan that I was missing. Like everyone else had a roadmap and I was just basically winging it along the way. But the thing is, nobody has it all figured out. Not the people with millions of followers, not the people on stage at conferences, not even the ones who look like they built their business overnight. And I love what Simon Script talks about when it comes to business planning. He built and sold multiple companies. And his advice is to forget the 20 pages business plan. Instead, he uses something called the mind map. It's this very simple, flexible way of mapping out where your business could go without locking yourself into like a really rigid path that will probably change anyway. And that really resonated with me because when I look back on my own journey, almost nothing went according to plan. I didn't plan to get laid off twice, right? I didn't plan to end up at Google. I didn't plan to start a YouTube channel here. And every major turning point in my life came from willing to move forward without knowing exactly where I was going. And this is the second part of the framework. So L is for lean on systems, not uncertainty. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a few simple systems that help you make decisions and keep moving when things feel like they're just uncertain because clarity doesn't come before you start. It comes from doing. So if you're sitting there right now thinking, I don't have it all figured out yet, I want you to know that it's completely normal. And honestly, it might be your greatest strength because the people who insist on having everything mapped out before they begin, they're usually the ones who never even start. And speaking of systems, I want to share a story with you that happened to me in my own business. So when I first started, one of the best decisions I ever made, though I didn't realize at the time, was hiring the right accountant. Can you relate to this? I bet a lot of you agree with me that this is such an important hire. So before that, I had a terrible experience with a much bigger accounting firm. Absolutely terrible communication and lots of missed deadlines. That's honestly a story for another time. But this new accountant, he just came highly recommended by friends who had been running their own business for years. And he was exactly what I needed. And luckily, he recommended that I switch to Xero as my accounting software. But that was over 8 years ago now, and I've used it ever since. So with Xero, I get a real-time view of how the business is doing, every invoice with reminders that they're overdue, And as a freelancer back then, this is such an important part of being paid on time. So every expense automatically reconciled in the system. I use it integrated with this software called Dex. And I simply have to just take a photo of my receipts and have them all cleanly organized in one place. And I can see where my income is coming from, what's outstanding, and how much I should set aside to make sure I have enough to pay taxes, right? So now I check my dashboard in 30 seconds. It tells me what I need to know. And when I get back to work, I can get back without carrying all those invisible stress. It's one of those systems that I think pays for itself over and over again in just peace of mind alone. If this is what you need right now, there's an offer on the moment at the time of making this video. It's 90% off for 6 months using the links below. And thanks to Xero for sponsoring this video. This next lesson is that structure is what sets you free. And this is the part that honestly took me the longest to learn. And I think a lot of people resist this because it doesn't sound exciting. But here it is. The entrepreneurs who feel the most free are the ones with the most structure. I know that sounds a bit backwards because when most of us start a business, we're running away from structure. We don't want that rigid schedules, the corporate processes and the politics and all that bureaucracy. We want flexibility. We want to do things our way. But here's what actually happens when you have no structure. So every single day becomes a guessing game. What should I work on? Who do I follow up with? How much did I spend last month? What's my priority right now? You end up spending half your energy just figuring out what to do instead of actually doing it. So Dan Martell, who's built and sold multiple companies, he talks about this idea of spending money to save time instead of spending time to save money. And I think that principle applies to structure too. So when you invest a little bit of time upfront, building simple systems, then you buy back hours every single week. So for me, it was small things at first. A weekly planning session every Sunday night where I map out my top 3 priorities. Maybe a simple spreadsheet to track my content pipeline. Maybe a recurring calendar block for deep work in the morning before I check email or any social media scrolling. So none of it was really complicated. But when you stack them together, these small systems, they can completely change how you operate. And that is the third part of this framework. So E is for expect the messy middle, because even with good structure and systems, business is still very messy. The difference is that the structure gives you floor to stand on when things get really chaotic. It means that you're not starting from scratch every single day. You have something to fall back on, something that keeps you grounded when everything else feels really uncertain. So hear me out if you're the type of person that resists structure like I did because it feels too corporate or too rigid. I really encourage you to reframe that because in the everyday chaos of running a business, it's the one thing that sets you free to do your best work. This next lesson is that your energy is the business. And for someone who's a recovering workaholic, this really shows up in everything you do. When your energy is low, everything suffers. So your content gets flat, your decision-making is going to get slow, your creativity disappears. And you start saying yes to things that you should really just say no to because you're just too tired to think clearly. So I used to believe that productivity was about squeezing more into my day, into every single hour and every single minute. I worked 9 hours straight and realized I only done about 4 hours of real meaningful work. And the rest was just really busy work, like distractions and lots of decision fatigue. I was managing my time, but I was ignoring my energy completely. You probably heard about this study from the American Psychological Association, which found that decision fatigue, it significantly reduces the quality of choices people make throughout the day, which means that the more small decisions you're making, like what to post, what to reply to, what to eat, the less mental energy you have left for the big ones. And this is the fourth part of the framework. A is for automate your decisions, not with complicated software, although that helps sometimes, but with really simple rules and routines that remove the need to think about everything from scratch. So for me, I did a few things. For example, like batching my content creation into specific days, so I'm not constantly switching between creating and managing. And other things like having a standardized response for the type of emails that come in every single week. And I also learned to protect my mornings for deep work. So I only do deep work in the mornings and push all of my meetings, emails, and everything else to the afternoon, because that's when my brain has really spent its best energy. And that's when I can do my shallow work. So the point of this is that you can't pour from an empty cup. And I know that sounds like something you read on the motivational poster, but it's actually true. So if you don't protect your energy, that business that you're running will drain it. And then you wonder why you're working so hard and getting so little back. And the last one, to stay in the game long enough to win. So this last truth is one that ties everything together. And it's probably one of the hardest ones to accept especially in a world that loves overnight success stories. So the unfair advantage in business is not being the smartest person in the room. It's not having the best idea with the biggest following. It's staying in the game long enough for the compound effect to kick in. So Simon Squibb, he talks about this concept of delayed gratification. He shares how his first client at his agency, he actually did the work for free. Not because he didn't value himself, but because he was playing the long game. And that one client stayed on with him for years and referred dozens of others. Most people never have the patience for that. And I see the same thing in my own journey. So when I started this YouTube channel, I posted videos for months with barely any views. There were so many days when I thought, is this even worth it? But I kept going, not because I'm more disciplined than anyone else, but because I already learned from my career that the compound effect is really real. And every small action you take, it really adds up. Not in a week, not even a month, but over a year, 2 years, 5 years, that result becomes almost unrecognizable compared to where you started. So Darren Hardy writes about this in The Compound Effect. Small, consistent actions repeated over time, it leads to massive transformation. It's not the big dramatic moves that can change your life. It's really that boring daily stuff that nobody sees. And this is the last part of the CLEAR framework, R. And that stands for revisit and adjust, because the people who stay in the game aren't the ones who get it right the first time. They're the ones who keep checking in, keep tweaking on the process, keep learning from what's working and what's not working. And they treat their business like a living thing. It's not a fixed business plan. So if you're in that stage right now where it feels like nothing is happening, where you're putting in the work and not seeing the results, I want you to hear this. You're not behind. You're just in the building process. And the people who win are the ones who don't quit during the part where it doesn't feel like it's working yet. I'm Lori, and thank you so much for being here. I'll see you in the next video.